Okay, great. I think we are now live.
Awesome.
Yeah, nice. Okay, well, we'll let some people hop on the live stream while I do a little introduction. And I'm just gonna make sure we're still good. Okay, great. So hello, everyone, and welcome to our live stream. This afternoon, I am joined by Raja Belle Freeman, whose current work, Consider This Your Trigger Warning, is up in Akron Soul Train's CapSOUL gallery until December 16th. So there's still time to see it in person. This afternoon, we'll talk about Raja Belle's writing process, combining poetry and visual art, and accidentally discovering something that's pretty magical that we'll look at later too. As always, thank you to all of our sponsors who continue to allow us to support amazing artists and bring innovative exhibitions to the community. Okay. Raja, can you kind of introduce yourself and give us a little background?
Yeah, I'm Raja Belle Freeman. I'm a poet and a poetry teaching artist or a creative writing teaching artist, and a visual artist. This is my first professional visual arts opportunity, but I've been performing poetry and writing poetry like all over the place, all over the city of Cleveland. And yeah, I don't know, did I forget something important? Or you like
I,
make sure you say this?
I will. How did you start getting into poetry and writing?
I started getting into poetry, I think, because my family was into poetry. Especially like when I started seeing my brothers writing, and when I came to discover that like my parents are also poets. It's like it was one of those things that I just ended up being interested in, especially when I had to do it for school. And then I ended up being a student for 12 literary arts, and that's kind of where my career in poetry took off because there were a lot of great opportunities to meet new people, network, and grow as a writer. And then I ended up majoring in creative writing in college.
Oh, that's awesome. What are you, a lot of your writing is about current events and the political sphere and things happening in the world. Can you kind of maybe talk about how you write about that or why you need to write about that?
I end up writing about what I see, especially when I see something and it gives me an idea to write about. Because that's really my writing process usually comes like I have to see something before I can start writing something, and it has to be something that actually impacts me, right? And so when I look at the way that our world works and the way that our media is and the way that things are always seeming to sort of something evil is always going. You know what I mean? And I always just end up focusing my writing towards that. In fact, in the least in like the recent years, I've had a hard time finally transitioning to being able to write about myself. Um, because I always focus on like the world at large, especially with like police brutality and the cyclical nature of uh, the media's consumption of Black death.
Yeah, do you find it like cathartic to write about it or um because it's a lot to take in, you know?
I think for me, I have a hard time explaining things when I'm just talking sometimes. So it really is just like, this is the best way I can figure out how to say something, you know? Like I'm one of those people that will break things down into analogies or metaphors to make them clearer. And then I realized I can actually turn those things into poems and people are able to understand. It's about being understood and it's about making it digestible even though it is like it's in your face and it's like, wow, that's a lot to take in, it is easier to understand and comprehend than if I tried to just throw all of the facts at you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think like for like metaphorically, people kind of they can relate things to other things, and the way that you use metaphor makes it maybe more relatable or more digestible rather than just getting numbers kind of thrown at you, which can kind of be desensitizing.
Yeah, I think the most important thing that a writer can do is be able to relate the world that people know and have an understanding of to things that they don't know and don't have an understanding of. Because once you bring those two things together and show the similarities, it gives you a better understanding of the things you didn't understand before.
Oh, interesting. Okay, let me go back. Sorry, I'm just looking at the Facebook live as well. If anyone watching has any questions or comments, please feel free to write them in the comments below and I will get to them. So you, the title of the so the title of this exhibition that you have at Akron Soul Train is Consider This Your Trigger Warning, and it's based off of one of your poems. Can you talk a little bit about how you wrote that poem and like the techniques that you used? And we'll see it, I guess, in action after.
Well, so the first time I wrote a poem similar to Consider This Your Trigger Warning, it was I saw a sticker that said, No kids hungry, no meals missing. And then I took words out of it and I said, No kid meals missing, no meals missing, no kids missing, right? And I started taking out letters and words to create new sentences. That was the first time I'd tried a poem like that. And that led me to look for words where you could take letters out and start new words, right? Like if you take the B out of black, you have lack, which is, I don't know why I didn't do that one. I don't know why I didn't use the word lack in that poem. But the trigger warnings poem that I have, the first line is, when was the last time you saw a trigger warning before a black boy died in prose? And the reason for that is that oftentimes in poetry, at poetry readings, especially at poetry slams, they'll give you trigger warnings to say like something traumatizing is discussed in this poem, right? It's not just a poetry thing. It's like something triggering is about to happen, something that might make you think of something that is upsetting, that might harm you mentally or emotionally is going to happen in this poem, right? But we talk about Black death in poems all the time, and we almost never give trigger warnings for them. Like there'll even be like trigger warnings for death or grief, but it's not typically for Black poems. And I think that's because we're so desensitized to it that we don't think that there's a trigger warning necessary. So that's why the first line is, when was the last time you saw a trigger warning before a Black boy died in prose? And then you take lines away from that, take away words, you have things like, when was the last time you saw a Black boy in prose? Or when was the last time you saw a Black rose? I should memorize that poem.
It's an incredible like literary device and like way to write poetry, and visually looks really stunning just like on the page as well. Before we go see the actual exhibit, can you talk about how you have been kind of maybe looking for ways to combine your drawing and poetry, and how you discovered, I guess, the lighting and the tricks that you've done to make this exhibit happen?
So I've always wanted to combine poetry and art, and I would have people tell me like, you've got to put your poetry with your art. But for the most part, the things that I would draw or create didn't have much of a meaning to me. And I couldn't exactly figure out how to tie the two together because I hadn't really figured out how to create meaningful visual things. And with this exhibition, I had smart light bulbs in my apartment, and I could change the color of them whenever I wanted. And then like I'm changing the color this one day and I realized that like anything I had drawn in red would disappear when the lights were red. And I started like looking this up. I was like, I can't be the only person that has ever heard of this, right? And there are some artists that have done something very similar with different colors of lights, and it got me like very into creating different images, like smiley face, frowny face, right? That's where I started at. And like you can't do it right if there's white light coming into the room. So I was like a crazy person covering my windows with like garbage bags and duct tape to get like the darkness right. It was crazy. It was such an interesting process. But once I finally got it down and I was able to start drawing different things, I got the idea to combine the poem, which has words and phrases that disappear, with the picture, so that lines of the poem would change with the lights, and then I could create images to display what was being said in the lines of the poem to go along with it. It was really an interesting and long process that just had a lot of different steps to it.
Yeah, it's feels like very innovative and really exciting. We also like have a sound element during the exhibition. We won't have the sound on of you reciting the poem, and it's this very immersive experience. So, okay, I'm going to take everyone with me to see the exhibition. Now, there are some changing lights. They're not flashing a ton, but you'll see the lights change and either dim or fade. So just be mindful of that. Let me grab my stuff. We're going to walk through our main part of the gallery, which is Deborah Di Gregorio's work, and into our CapSOUL gallery so that we can see the exhibition. Okay, and I am going to turn or close the door behind me so we get the full effect. And then, so can you talk about maybe why you chose certain images to illustrate the poem?
Yeah, for sure. I talked about in the poem the one with the gun turning into a rose, a hand holding a gun and a hand holding a rose. I say, when was the last time you saw a black rose in the poem? Because a black rose is a symbol of grief. And then the gun is obviously, people, we see guns and we just think of like whatever we think of. But I guess my goal is to have the very big contrast between the grief from the rose and the anger and the violence of the gun, even though one directly leads to the other. The Which one you going to next? I'm following.
Oh, well, I was going to ask about, you use a lot of skull type imagery, so we can talk maybe about this one.
Yeah, I wanted to really bring out the idea of death and decay, because like it's funny, we all have a skeleton in us, but for some reason thinking of a skeleton and seeing a skeleton is a whole new level of being afraid, even though it's with you all the time. It's just for me, I think we think of death and we don't think of the actual loss, decay, the fact that death continues on after you've buried a person. And the last time we see a person, they're still fully alive, fully intact, even though they're not with us anymore. And we forget that they're still there, fading out. And I think that's why it was important for me to use the skulls, not just to, show death itself, but to sort of make the point that it's like death doesn't end with the last time you see a person. And also the contrast between the alive face and the death face. I was just kind of hoping for that to be a shocking thing for it to be like, oh, I wasn't prepared for this. You know what I mean? Because it is one of those things where I'm hoping you don't have the trigger warning and you do end up like, oh, startled because death is a startling thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. I like the fact that it's like you don't have this trigger warning when you kind of come in here. You know the light's going to change, but you don't know exactly when or how. And a lot of times people come in and be like, oh, and like it'll kind of surprise them. They'll jump a little bit and then they look closer.
Yeah, I think it was funny because a couple of people I saw come in there, I think, didn't realize the lights were about to change on them. And then it was like, oh, I was looking at this happy picture and now I'm not.
This might be my favorite one.
I think it's probably my favorite one too.
Can you maybe talk about the symbolism using the bird or the wings? You've done that a couple times as well here.
I think of wings as just like a symbol of freedom, a symbol of, being able to go wherever you really want to go, right? And the idea of like becoming a bird is first of all like freedom isn't real for us, you know what I mean? So it's like
Mhm.
it becomes real for a bird because birds are actually the creatures that have them. I think that also with a I think that I use the wings for the boy as like a show of like innocence. Originally I had a halo in this piece. I don't think I ended up keeping it there. But I think it's just a fade away to show that like we don't really get to stay the way that we would hope to. Oh, this is really nice. How are you getting this on camera? I always had such a hard time.
This exhibition is very difficult to photograph, but my phone is doing a pretty good job in like as a video getting some of the details. It's interesting with the red light, I think the images are a little bit clearer. It changes.
Yeah, the blue light's definitely the harder to get images on.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna move on. And this here you have the poem written, and this is gonna be very hard for me to video, but I'll try my best. But on each one of these, you have that first line written all the way out, right?
Yes. When was the last time you saw a trigger warning before a black boy died in prose? And then all of the other lines after that are what show in red. With this, I was hoping for it to feel almost like makeshift graffiti, like someone trying to reach out but not exactly knowing how, because it can be hard to actually get your voice heard, especially when you're trying to talk about something that people don't focus on often. Um, so I guess I'm trying to make it look like, someone in a desperate attempt just kind of sprawled this out on the wall, hoping for people to actually look at it and see it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think that that definitely comes across. Um, People will notice that sometimes the lights kind of jump and sometimes they fade. I love that kind of like difference because when they fade, certain things will kind of almost stay behind or be visual longer until the lights completely change. And when it jumps, it's like it's really startling. I love that difference.
Yeah, I always hope that people see the jump first. I always want the jump to be the first experience. Whoa. Um,
Yeah.
with the fading, it's like it's almost like watching it slowly. It's like you're slowly losing one image and gaining the other one. I wanted to give some time between so that you can see what the transition between the two looks like.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna move on to this next wall. So in this one, instead of using the bird, you have the butterfly, but still that kind of like wings motif.
Yeah,
Yes.
the idea of wings being freedom. This one I was trying to convey the boy looking as though he was lying in a casket almost with his arms crossed over his chest. And I think butterflies are also a symbol of freedom, but also a symbol of beauty. And the idea of like his body is like almost exactly the same as the butterflies, is, showing that in life and in death, he was a beautiful being, beautiful creature.
And like butterflies are also like endangered species, and kind of that kind of symbolism there could be really interesting. Okay. And then we have some more faces. So we have another skull one here. Let's see if the lights change. There they go. And then can you maybe talk about including the baby?
Yeah, I really wanted to include a crying baby. I I really like drawing crying babies. It's very strange, I know. But I really like drawing crying babies. I also just wanted to focus on the most obvious face of innocence I could think of. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you see that happy baby face and you don't think that that baby deserves anything bad happening to it, right? But then like as soon as something happens to a black boy at the hands of police, it's always, well, what did he do? Even if he was completely innocent. And I think that's why I wanted to include a baby specifically, because babies are completely innocent, and I feel like we are always looking for reasons why black children are guilty and they don't deserve it. So I had just wanted to include the most precious, innocent, couldn't have done anything face I could.
Yeah, it's so powerful. Okay. We're gonna move to this last piece. And this one also has text on it.
Oh yeah. It goes from when was the last time you saw a black boy to when was the last time you saw a black rose. And when the lights change, you no longer see most of his face. And you can just see that he's surrounded by roses. This one
Yeah.
was fun because like when there are pieces of images that stay in both lights, like the wings on both of the butterfly and the bird one and this one, you can like kind of really go in on the details of the things that stay, which is why the eyes on this one are, I think they kind of stick out more, like they're actually able to watch you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was just gonna comment on how the eyes stay, and it's so like piercing, and it's almost like he's hidden by the roses. They're trying to maybe protect him.
Yeah, there's really two ways to think about it. It's like either the black boy here is, gone, faded, he's died, or he is just surrounded by grief because again, a black rose is a symbol of
Um,
grief. So it's really there's two ways to go about thinking of this one. And I'm not sure which one I resonate with more. I just knew that I had to include this image of a black boy just buried, overtaken by black roses.
wow. Okay. I'm gonna kind of go through one more time as the lights change, just to get another view of some stuff. Do you want to talk about anything else with the drawings?
Um, I'm trying to think, what didn't I say already? um, I think that I want to say that I'm hoping these visuals connect to the poem as well as I intended them to. Um, because they just felt like the right fit for the things that I said. Um, I also picture myself creating a lot more of these. I picture this exhibit like growing more, even more than it has.
Now that was going to be one of my questions about like if you're planning on making more or working more in this way, doing more with maybe different poems.
Yeah, I think I'll do more with this one. Oh, we didn't talk about this one.
Yeah, we can talk about it real quick.
The middle finger and then the peace sign. That was one of the earliest ideas I had because it's like, oh, I feel like we have like two big ideas around Black men, right? They're always either the nice, peaceful guy or just the complete opposite of that guy. And there's like no in between. Um, and I think that we're getting to a point in our society where we start to care less and less about how other people view us, and we've understood that there are people that will love who we are just as much as there are people that will love who we are wishing we could be, you know what I mean? And this one
Mhm.
is more about like sort of this portraying how you feel honestly without feeling like you have to be one certain way. Which is why it's like I can be the peace sign guy or I can be the middle finger guy. It's another
Yeah,
it was really fun to draw because I got to keep the hoodie the whole time, so I got to put myself.
nice. Yeah, it is interesting. Like, why can't, he be both and in different circumstances, but society has that kind of singular view.
Yeah, it's like once you get put into a box, you're not getting out of that box.
Yeah. So you're planning on making more drawings for this poem?
I am for sure.
Ah, it's just such a cool experience to be in this room with the lights changing. And then if our viewers are able to come in person with the audio going, it's very immersive. Yeah, I'm gonna step out and then I have a printout of the actual poem that we can look at so people can see kind of how it's written and how it just looks on the page itself. So you can see the different lines that were taken out and different words that are formed. I just think that it's so creative to write in this way. And it's a very visual way of writing. Like just this piece, I think can be like a visual piece in and of itself, you know?
Yeah, it's funny. I just had a student like this week, and he was starting a poetry project, but he wasn't sure how to approach it, and he wanted to do something that dealt with some kind of constraint, right? It's like in poetry, sometimes you write an entire poem without using the letter E, and the poem just becomes inherently more impressive because you were able to skip using the letter E the entire time. And just thinking about the fact that you did that makes it really cool. And I showed him this poem and I told him about this form, and he seemed to be really interested in trying it. Um, and he, at first, when I talked to him, was going to write about something that might not have been particularly important, you know? And then I was like, well, why do you want to do that? And then he like, within the conversation of me showing him this poem and talking about writing and the things that he cared about, he said he wanted to try this form of writing the first line and then deleting things throughout, kind of like a blackout poem. He wanted to try that and write a poem about Israel and Palestine. And that was just like really cool to hear, especially from
Yeah.
a student that I had just met, you know?
Yeah, it's awesome how like putting parameters on something can like just engage more creativity. Sometimes it's hard to act with just a completely blank slate, you know? I think in like painting, it's hard to start on a blank canvas, but if you have like a rule or something that you're going for, it it makes you more creative in a way and like want to do more.
Yeah, like the idea that you were able to create something that is still impressive without being able to do it the way, without having the complete freedom to do it however you want it, is really interesting and really impressive.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna kind of venture back towards my computer so we can do a little conclusion. Anybody watching us live, feel free to type in any comments or questions that you have for Raja. We're just taking a quick view of the gallery and Deborah DiGregorio's work, which is also up. Let's see. Oop. Gently set you down. And stop the video. Okay. Well, if anyone wants to put any questions or comments, even if it's after the live stream, that totally do so, and I can look at those later. Let's see. I think I asked a lot of my questions. What have you learned, I guess, about like being a visual artist or being a multidisciplinary artist? I guess you can call yourself now, right? A mixed media, multimedia artist. What have you learned kind of from this experience?
Well, first of all, I will say that I did not know how to hang up an art exhibit, and now I have kind of an idea. Thank you, Meryl. I went in like, so do I just put it on the wall? Or and you're like, no, you can't just put it on the wall. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, there's measurements and eye level, and yeah, no, I love that, like coming into, I guess, new worlds. Anyone that's a poet or a writer that has an idea for something visual or sculptural or an installation, or someone who's a visual artist and wants to like make stories about their work or poems, like you don't just have to be one thing, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, because for a long time I thought that I would never pursue a professional visual art thing because like poetry is my whole thing. And then I was like, but why? You know? And it was something I just kind of fell into, and I knew Akron Soul Train would be a good place for me to start off at. So I feel like the fact that I've figured out how to actually set up the lights, because that was a big problem for a long time.
Yeah.
I finally know like what brand. I got I think they're Govee strip lights, and how to actually program them and all that good stuff. That took a while. That was a big chunk of my time because I had different lighting situations and none of them would quite do what I wanted. And once I found these, I realized that they could do the fade and then jump, and almost everything else wouldn't do the right thing. So I think first of all, it teaches me what lights to use, but second, it's like I almost gave up on that a few times. I was like, I guess I'll just have it work this way, or I'll just do it like this. I think what I learned from this experience is to just like not compromise what you want out of your art. Like if you have a vision for something, figure out how to make it go the way you want it to go. And don't just be like, I guess I just give up on this. Because for a while I was like, I guess I'll just do it this way. There was a time where I was gonna have like the lights on a timer, and I was just gonna schedule it so that I would have to put in, okay, at 4:01 you're gonna be red, and at 4:02 you're gonna be blue.
Wow. That's too much scheduling.
Yeah, it would have taken so long.
Yeah. No, I love that. Like anybody that's tried to do anything in like any creative discipline, there's not necessarily a rule book on how to do everything, right? Even like painters have to figure out, well, how do I want my brush strokes to look, or how am I going to do what I want to do? So there is a lot of creative life is just problem solving. Like, how do we make what we want to happen, what's in our brains, happen out in the world? So I love that perseverance, and I think that though the LED strip lights worked really, really well, that was one of my kind of like, how are we going to make this happen? And it works great and looks awesome. So that was really exciting to be a part of myself.
Yeah, I'm really glad that I was able to figure out a good way to get it together. Those words.
Um, and thank you, Kim. Kim says very powerful imagery. Thank you for tuning in and watching. So I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you all for joining us. Remember, you can see Raja Belle's work until Saturday, December 16th. So there's one more week to see it. Our gallery is open Wednesday through Saturday, from 11 to 4. Next week, we're going to be open until 7 on Friday, and we're having a closing party on Saturday, the 16th, from 5 to 7. We're going to be announcing our 2024 artists. So that's really exciting. And we'll be closing out Raja's and Deborah's show. So if you can make it to that, please do so. Everything is on Facebook, on Instagram, on our website. And we hope to see you all in person. Thank you so much, Raja, for joining me. And we'll see you in the next live stream.
Yeah.
Bye.